Popular iridology versus holistic iridology. That's potentially an interesting contrast, isn't it? Let's rephrase that to North American iridology versus constitutional iridology. It's probably safe to say most people who practice iridology consider themselves to be holistic, but are they really? My name is Judith Cobb. I'm a master herbalist, natural nutrition clinical practitioner, certified iridologist, and certified comprehensive iridology instructor. I've been in practice for nearly 40 years as a health coach and a teacher of practitioners. I've studied and practiced many styles of iridology over the years. When I first started out, the only type of iridology that was available was what I'll call North American iridology. These are some of the more readily available iris maps, and in fact, the very first iris map I ever owned and still have in my files is this one by Bernard Jensen. Many of these charts have been created by people I know and respect, so please do not think I am dissing these wonderful iridologists. What I see happening when most iridologists use these charts is they fall into the trap of North American iridology. Here's what I mean by that. The challenge arises when we see that these maps subdivide the iris into minute sections that would be at most maybe 2 fibers wide in the iris. These maps that include such minuscule organ parts as the renal pelvis, the inner ear, the jaw, all tempt iridologists to treat the body like an allopathic physician, subdividing it into tiny parts and prescribing treatments for those tiny parts. Not really a holistic approach at all. You've seen people on social media offering free iris readings, and they focus on those tiny details. If an organ area is really only 2 fibers wide, how can anyone be really sure exactly which organ they are looking at? Being off by only a tiny bit entirely changes the analysis, and suddenly the nose becomes the tongue or the eye becomes the upper jaw. This style of iridology is what I learned when I became an iridologist many years ago. Then in the early 1990s, I learned constitutional iridology and a truly holistic way of using iridology that changed the way I work with my clients. This is a holistic iridology map. Notice that it only includes major organs and organ systems that have a significant impact on the functioning of the body. We don't have a herb that works specifically on the renal pelvis, but as nutritionists and herbalists and naturopaths, we understand how to support the kidneys through food choices, by supporting digestion, and by nourishing the kidneys. When we have iris maps like this one, we are much more inclined to focus on the interrelationship of organs and organ systems. It's a truly holistic approach, rather than being distracted by minute details that offer little value in an iridology assessment. First, we look at the overall color, which teaches us about the general overarching inherent tendencies. Each base color or constitution has a set of inherent health traits, including potential health risks. Understanding this alone lays the foundation for understanding everything else we see in an iris and gives us greater insight into our clients' inherent health predispositions. Then we consider the color variations like the flecks of rusty orange we see in this iris, which gives us more specific insight to inherent predispositions. Even these flecks are inherent. They are not an indication of toxicity or heavy metal accumulation. The color of the pigment tells us which organ is inherently predisposed to insufficiencies, and the placement of the pigment teaches us which other organs are likely going to have to deal with the fallout of those insufficiencies. Even dark brown eyes have color variations that add information to the wellness story. The next layer of information we consider is the fiber structure. This layer of information adds to our understanding of organ systems and their inherent predispositions. These petal-shaped markings will not go away when the right diet is employed or the right supplements are consumed. With holistic iridology, the idea is not to subdivide the iris and the person into minute little bits. It is to understand how the inherent predispositions can work together to create the symptoms the client is experiencing. More than that, this deeper understanding allows us to easily create programs that address more than just the symptoms, but actually take us to the root of the problem. And even more than that, when we see and understand the interrelationship of various constitutional markers, we can work preventively. How powerful is that to be able to understand inherent potentials and create lifestyle programs that could stall off or prevent the onset of health problems? It's almost like having a Star Trek tricorder, and we haven't gotten bogged down in every little detail. When we do holistic iridology, using the iris map is the very last step of an assessment, and sometimes we don't use it at all because the constitution, the colors, the fiber have given us plenty of information to work with for the time being. We can always go back to the map later on if we need to. Really, when we understand iridology in this way, we can do a basic assessment from 2 feet away and without any special equipment. Practicing iridology using these principles helps us to avoid overwhelming our clients with too much information in each appointment. It helps us to get our client programs designed right in our client sessions. It guides the questions we need to ask our clients. It helps us to be much more holistic in our methods with our client. North American Iridology would assess these images taken of the same iris 20 years apart and with different equipment, as the client must have done a lot of cleansing to turn those eyes from that gray blue to lavender. But then how do we explain that the pigment has accumulated in the more lavender colored eye? Could the client build up indications of so-called toxic exposure while cleansing? North American Iridology would also say that this client has done some really good nervous system work to really build up the adrenal glands, and that is why the pupil is smaller in the newer picture. Now, if we were to swap these images, the story would change. North American Iridology would say somehow the client cleared up the heavy metal drugs, but while doing that, the rest of the body got loaded down and is a less vibrant color. And the nervous system is stressed, as indicated by the larger pupil. I have yet to see a North American iridologist address the influence of technology, so the light source and the type of light, on iris images. All changes in images are always attributable to cleansing and gunking up if you're a North American iridologist. However, as we've seen with these images on the screen, and these are an excellent example of technology differences, we've seen how different and how important the variations in technology are in documenting the iris. This is something, again, that constitutional iridologists do recognize. As you can tell, I'm not a huge fan of North American Iridology anymore. I truly love teaching constitutional iridology in a very holistic way. I hope one day you'll join me for my iridology certification preparation course called Confident Nutritionist Dynamic Iridology. Thanks for being with me today.